Have you ever walked into a room and felt the air shift, like someone invisible twisted the atmosphere against you? People who once smiled now whisper, allies become strangers, and suddenly, without reason, it feels like the world is conspiring to push you out. That's not just coincidence. That's not just mood. That's the spirit of witchcraft, subtle, quiet, working behind the scenes to turn people against you, not by force, but by influence. And if you've ever wondered why you were suddenly misunderstood, betrayed, or left out for no clear reason, you've felt the sting of it. You see, the spirit of witchcraft doesn't attack you head on. It doesn't come with a loud announcement. It manipulates, it shifts perceptions, it bends conversations in dark corners and makes people believe lies without ever questioning them. That's why some of the battles you fight don't even make sense, because the enemy you're fighting is not flesh and blood. It's not the friend who stopped talking to you, not the coworker spreading rumors, not the family member who suddenly turned cold. They are only the instruments. The true battle is spiritual, and the true enemy is unseen. Witchcraft works through influence. It poisons the well before you arrive to drink from it. It plants seeds of doubt about your character, your intentions, your truth, and those seeds grow quickly when watered by fear, jealousy, or pride. This is why you can be living with integrity, doing everything right, giving your best, and still, people turn against you. They're not reacting to who you are. They're reacting to the spirit that distorted the picture of you in their minds. And here's the danger. If you don't recognize it for what it is, you'll start to fight people instead of fighting the power that manipulated them. But here's what you need to understand. No spirit can destroy who you are unless you hand it permission. Witchcraft gains its power through agreement. It wants you to doubt yourself. It wants you to lower your energy, to respond with anger, to lose your focus. Because once you start fighting in the wrong arena, arguing with people instead of standing in your truth, you've already lost. The strength you carry is not in proving others wrong. It's in refusing to let the lies define you. Have you ever walked into a space and without anyone saying a word, you just knew something had shifted? The atmosphere changes, and you can feel it deep in your bones. People who once greeted you with warmth suddenly avoid eye contact. Conversations stop when you enter the room, and you sense this invisible wall building up around you. That's the power of unseen influence. It's not loud, it's not obvious, but it's there, pulling strings in silence. And most people don't even realize they've been caught in it. The witchcraft spirit doesn't come at you with fire or force. It changes the climate. It makes the room colder without touching the thermostat. It makes people distance themselves from you without them even realizing why they're doing it. It's manipulation at the highest level, working in the air before you even open your mouth. That's why so many of you have experienced sudden shifts in friendships, in workplaces, in your own families, where everything seemed fine one day, and the next, something invisible created tension. That's not random, that's not coincidence, that's the spirit at work, and if you don't recognize it, you'll start questioning yourself instead of seeing the truth. It never comes straight at you. That's the trick. If it stood in front of you, if it announced itself, you would see it for what it is, and you'd fight it. But this spirit doesn't use confrontation. It uses manipulation. It doesn't attack your strength. It undermines your foundation. It twists conversations when you're not there. It bends truth until it barely resembles what you said, and it whispers just enough poison to make people question you without ever giving them proof. That's how it works. It thrives in the shadows, because if it can't defeat you in the open, it will try to destroy you in secret. And the people being used against you often don't even realize it. They're convinced their feelings are their own, when in reality, those feelings were manufactured, stirred up, and placed inside them by influence. That's why it's so dangerous, because you can't always point to the source. You only see the effect. You only see the sudden shift in someone's eyes, the way loyalty cracks without reason, the way trust evaporates overnight. And if you don't recognize that it's manipulation, you'll waste your time trying to prove yourself to people who have already been persuaded by something far darker than the facts. The greatest mistake people make when they feel attacked, betrayed, or suddenly abandoned is they lock their focus on the human being standing in front of them. They think it's the friend who stopped calling, the boss who turned cold, the family member who suddenly started spreading rumors. They think the fight is with the person they can see, when in truth the person is only the instrument. You can waste years of your life in anger, bitterness, and resentment toward people who were never truly the enemy. That's exactly how the witchcraft spirit works. It hides behind faces. It hides behind familiar voices. It hides behind the ones you once trusted, because if it can get you to attack them, you'll never confront the real enemy working in the background. And you've felt this before. You've asked yourself, why would they say that? Why would they do that? Why would they turn against me when I've done nothing to them? You go in circles searching for logic, looking for reasons that aren't there, and that's because you're looking in the wrong place. It was never really about them. They're the visible surface of an invisible battle. If you don't grasp that truth, you'll spend your life fighting shadows, trying to reason with people whose perception has already been manipulated. That's why forgiveness is so powerful, not because it makes what they did okay, not because it erases the betrayal or excuses the hurt. Forgiveness is powerful because it frees you from fighting the wrong fight. When you forgive, you're saying, I see past the human being in front of me. I see the spirit that used them, and I refuse to waste my energy wrestling with flesh and blood when my battle is not with them at all. That shift in mindset gives you clarity, it gives you strength, and it gives you back your authority. Think about how many people collapse under the weight of bitterness. They walk around carrying grudges, nursing old wounds, replaying conversations that happened years ago. Do you realize that's how the witchcraft spirit wins? Not because those people hurt you once, but because you've allowed that hurt to live inside you every single day since then. The spirit doesn't even need to keep attacking. It planted one seed, and you've watered it with anger ever since. That's why the Bible says you're not wrestling against flesh and blood. Flesh and blood may have carried the knife, but the hand that guided it was not theirs alone. I want you to remember this. People can fail you, people can betray you, people can lie about you, but they are not the mastermind behind the destruction. The moment you start seeing them as the enemy, you've already lost sight of the real target. The true enemy wants division. It wants families ripped apart. It wants friendships destroyed. It wants marriages severed, because once you're divided, you're weakened. Once you're isolated, you're easier to break, and if it can convince you that people are the problem, you'll never turn around and fight the spirit that orchestrated it all. That's why you cannot hate them. You can't carry that venom. When you start hating the very people who were manipulated, you become just as blind as they were. Instead, you have to rise above it. You have to say, I will not waste my breath fighting pawns when I have the strength to confront the force that moved them. And here's the truth. You confront it not by screaming louder, not by proving yourself, not by trying to control people's perceptions. You confront it by living in your truth so fully, so unshakably, that no manipulation can rewrite your story. There are people who will never apologize to you. There are people who will never see clearly what they did, because their eyes were blinded by that influence. If you wait for them to admit it, if you wait for them to make it right, you may be waiting forever. That's why your healing, your breakthrough, your freedom cannot be tied to whether they understand. It has to come from your decision to stop giving power to what manipulated them in the first place. You must stand with this conviction: I will not fight people, I will not fight faces, I will not fight names. I will not waste my energy attacking those who themselves are victims of a bigger deception. I will fight the influence. I will fight the spirit. I will fight the darkness that thought it could turn people against me, and I will do it by refusing to lose myself in the process. Because if you lose your peace, if you lose your character, if you lose your integrity while fighting back, then the witchcraft spirit has already won. The real victory is standing in strength, with your spirit unbroken, even when people turn away. It's saying, I don't hate you for what you did. I see what was behind you, and I refuse to let it take me down with you. That's how you take back your power. That's how you keep yourself unshaken when the people you loved most shift against you. And that's how you show the spirit of witchcraft it cannot win. Because no matter how many faces it hides behind, you'll never mistake the mask for the true enemy. It always starts small. That's how this spirit works, never in the open, never in ways that are obvious. It plants seeds, tiny thoughts that seem harmless at first. Maybe it's a whisper in someone's mind. Are they really as loyal as they seem? Or why did they say it that way? A seed of doubt about your intentions, about your character, about your truth. And once that seed is dropped, all it takes is a little bit of fear, a little bit of jealousy, a little bit of pride in the wrong soil, and suddenly what was just a thought becomes a belief. What was just a question becomes a story. You've seen this happen. One person makes an innocent comment, and before long, it's twisted into gossip. One person starts feeling insecure, and before long, they're convinced you're the enemy. One misinterpreted word, one misplaced tone, and it grows into division that makes no sense. That's the genius of this manipulation. It doesn't need facts. It doesn't need proof. It thrives on suggestion. It thrives on half-truths. It thrives on emotion, because emotion is easier to control than logic. And by the time you realize what's happening, the seeds have already taken root, and people are treating you differently without ever questioning why. And here's the danger. If you're not careful, you'll start letting those seeds grow inside you too. You'll start doubting yourself. You'll start thinking, maybe they're right. Maybe I did do something wrong. Maybe I am the problem. That's exactly what this spirit wants, to make you question your own identity, to make you carry the weight of lies that were never yours to begin with. Once you internalize the seeds, it doesn't even need other people anymore. It has you turning against yourself. That's why you have to guard your spirit the way you guard your home. You don't let every voice walk through your door. You don't let every opinion take root in your mind. Just because someone throws a seed your way doesn't mean you have to water it. And this is where discernment comes in, the ability to recognize what's true, what's false, and what's simply been poisoned before it ever reached your ears. Because the spirit of witchcraft doesn't just want to distort how others see you, it wants to distort how you see yourself. If it can convince you to shrink to doubt, to question your worth, then it doesn't matter how many people stand against you. You've already surrendered from the inside out. But when you recognize the seed for what it is, when you refuse to water it, when you say, "That's not who I am, that's not my truth, that's not my story," the seed dies before it ever has the chance to grow, and once you master that, once you stop being swayed by whispers, once you refuse to let doubt take root in you, the manipulation loses its grip, because a seed can only grow in the soil that accepts it. If you don't give it a home, it cannot survive. And here's where so many people lose the battle without even realizing it. They start swinging at the wrong target. When someone turns against you, your instinct is to fight back, to defend yourself, to argue, to prove them wrong, to explain your side until your voice runs dry. But don't you see? That's exactly what the spirit wants. It wants you so distracted fighting people that you never confront the real power behind it. It wants you drained, frustrated, tangled in endless conversations that go nowhere, because while you're fighting them, the influence keeps spreading in silence. You can win every argument and still lose the war. You can convince one person of your truth while 10 others are being deceived behind the scenes. That's why it's dangerous to let your focus settle on people instead of the source. Because once you do, you give away your strength. You let your emotions lead you. You let anger, fear, and desperation take control. And the more you fight flesh and blood, the more you blind yourself to the fact that this is not a human battle. Think about it. You've had moments where no matter what you said, no matter how clear you made yourself, the other person just didn't get it. You thought if you just explained better, they would understand. But they couldn't, not because you didn't communicate, but because their perception had already been hijacked. You were talking to ears that could hear you, but not listen to you, and the longer you tried to force them to see your truth, the more powerless you felt. That's the trap, to make you believe you can fix it by fighting harder, when the reality is, the harder you fight in the wrong place, the weaker you become. The strength is not in proving yourself to people who have already been manipulated. The strength is in standing firm, refusing to let their misunderstanding shake your identity. The strength is in recognizing when a battle is not worth fighting. Some fights aren't losses, they're distractions. And every moment you waste swinging at shadows is a moment you could have spent fortifying your spirit, elevating your focus, sharpening your vision. When you know who you are, when you are anchored in truth, you don't need to chase every lie. Lies are loud, but they collapse on their own when the truth remains steady. If you keep yourself rooted, if you refuse to be provoked into battles that don't matter, the deception eventually reveals itself for what it is. But if you get pulled into chaos, if you start defending yourself against every rumor, if you let the manipulation dictate your energy, you've already handed it victory without realizing it. That's why sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing. Not silence out of weakness, but silence out of strength. Silence that says, I know who I am, I don't need to fight for it, and I refuse to give this spirit the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. Because the truth is, the witchcraft spirit thrives on conflict. It feeds off division. But when you refuse to fight the wrong fight, you starve it. And here's the secret most people never realize. This spirit has no real power on its own. It cannot destroy you. It cannot take what belongs to you. It cannot erase the truth of who you are. The only way it gains ground is through agreement. It wants you to believe the lie. It wants you to take in the whispers and repeat them to yourself until they feel like your own thoughts. Because the moment you start saying, maybe I'm not good enough, maybe I am the problem, maybe I don't deserve this, you've opened the door. That's how it works. It convinces you to do its job for it. Understand this clearly. Outside influence only becomes inside destruction if you give it permission. That's why the battle is not what people say about you. It's what you begin to believe about yourself. Someone can call you a failure. Someone can say you don't belong. Someone can paint you as the villain, but their words mean nothing until you agree with them. The spirit knows this, so it attacks your mind, your confidence, your sense of worth. Because if it can get you to bow in your own thoughts, it never even has to fight you in reality. And haven't you seen this? People with talent, with strength, with vision, who collapse not because of what others did, but because they started repeating those lies until they became truth in their own heads. They carried shame that didn't belong to them. They carried blame they didn't earn. They carried an identity that was never theirs to begin with. That's why agreement is so dangerous. You may think it's just one negative thought, one little compromise, one moment of weakness, but that's how chains are built, link by link, thought by thought, until suddenly you're imprisoned by something you were strong enough to break all along. That's why you have to train yourself to reject the lie the moment it shows up, to say, that's not me, that's not my identity, that's not my truth, because every time you refuse agreement, you take back authority. Every time you shut the door to doubt, you reinforce your strength, and eventually that spirit loses its grip because influence only works on those who accept it. The power is not in what's said about you. The power is in whether or not you allow it to live inside you. Once you understand that, you stop being a victim, you stop being manipulated, you stop being swayed by every whisper. You realize that no matter how much the spirit tries to twist the narrative, it has no access unless you hand it the keys. Your greatest weapon in this battle is not louder words, not proving yourself, not chasing down every rumor, it's identity. When you know exactly who you are, when you are rooted in integrity, no spirit of manipulation can redefine you. That's the shield that nothing can penetrate. Because here's the truth, witchcraft doesn't need to touch your life to destroy it. It just needs to convince others to see you through a distorted lens. But if you are unshakable in your own truth, that distortion loses its power. Think about it. If you're grounded, if you're clear about your values, your purpose, your character, then no amount of gossip can undo that. People may be deceived for a season, but the consistency of your life, the strength of your integrity, will outlast the lies. It's when you start doubting yourself, when you bend, when you compromise, when you lower yourself to match the false story being told about you, that's when the manipulation wins. Because it didn't just distort their view of you, it distorted your view of yourself. And this is why character matters. Your reputation can be attacked, but your character is untouchable if you guard it. People can accuse you of things you never did. They can twist your actions. They can call you names. But if you stand in integrity, if you hold firm to your principles, the truth of who you are becomes undeniable over time. And that's what breaks the influence, consistency, a steady life that no lie can erode. You have to tell yourself every single day, I know who I am, I know what I stand for, I know what I will and will not compromise. That inner conviction becomes armor. It protects you from the need to defend yourself against every accusation. It keeps you from being swayed by temporary noise. Because at the end of the day, the spirit doesn't care about the noise. It cares about whether or not the noise makes you forget yourself. The strongest person in the room is not the one with the loudest voice. It's the one who knows their identity so deeply that no attack can shake it. That's what makes you untouchable. That's what makes the manipulation powerless. Because when the storm passes, and it always does, the truth of who you are will still be standing, unbroken, undeniable, and stronger than before. And when the spirit realizes it can't break you from the outside, it tries a different strategy. It isolates you. It wants you to feel like you're standing alone, like no one understands you, like the people you trusted have all walked away, because isolation is one of the most powerful weapons it has. If it can convince you that you're abandoned, then it doesn't even have to fight you anymore. You'll begin to collapse under the weight of loneliness. Haven't you noticed how when people turn against you, it's never just one? It's a ripple effect. One shifts, then another, and soon you're looking around asking yourself, where did everyone go? That's not coincidence. That's design. It wants you cornered, because when you're isolated, your mind becomes the battlefield. In that silence, the whispers grow louder, doubt echoes louder, fear feels heavier, and if you let it, That silence will make you believe the lie that you're forgotten, that you're unwanted, that you're weaker now because you're standing on your own. But here's the truth: you are never weaker alone if you're rooted in strength. Sometimes isolation isn't punishment, it's preparation. Sometimes the very people who walked away weren't meant to carry the next chapter of your life anyway. And the Spirit knows that if you realize your solitude is actually sharpening you, it loses its grip, so it tries to frame it as rejection instead of refinement. That's why you cannot fear standing alone. The crowd does not define you. The number of people clapping for you does not validate you, and the absence of their support does not erase your worth. If anything, isolation reveals who you truly are, because it strips away the noise and leaves only your core. And if your core is unshakable, then no amount of abandonment can break you. You see, the Spirit wants you to believe that isolation is weakness, but in reality, some of the strongest battles are won in silence. Some of the deepest strength is built in seasons where you have no one but yourself to lean on. And if you can endure that, if you can thrive in that, then when people return, when they finally see clearly, they'll find a version of you they can no longer manipulate, no longer shake, no longer break. And here's the turning point: you don't overcome this kind of influence by fighting harder in the natural, you overcome it by standing in authority. Authority breaks manipulation. Authority cuts through deception. Because the truth is, this spirit only thrives when you believe you're powerless, when you act like a victim, when you shrink back and let the lies dictate how you move. But the moment you stand tall, the moment you remind yourself that you were never at the mercy of their opinions, the manipulation begins to collapse. Authority doesn't beg to be understood. Authority doesn't chase after those who walked away. Authority doesn't waste time proving itself. Authority simply exists. It's in the way you carry yourself, in the way you speak, in the way you refuse to bend to the narrative others are trying to write about you. It's not arrogance, it's clarity. It's the unshakable confidence that says, I know who I am, I know what I stand for, and I refuse to let anything or anyone redefine me. When you move with authority, people may still misunderstand you at first, but over time, authority silences the noise. Because lies have an expiration date, but truth does not, authority doesn't fight to be seen. It's undeniable. You don't have to shout it from the rooftops. People feel it when you walk into the room. They recognize it in your composure, in your discipline, in your consistency. And that's what makes the spirit of manipulation tremble, because once you operate in authority, you no longer play its game. The witchcraft spirit thrives on pulling people into confusion, but authority brings clarity. It thrives on chaos, but authority brings order. It thrives on fear, but authority walks in courage. And once you choose to stand in that space, you can look at everything it tried to take from you and realize it never had power in the first place. You were the one holding it all along. And this is what you have to hold on to when the pressure feels unbearable. Lies don't last. Manipulation may spread quickly. It may feel overwhelming. It may even convince people for a season. But the truth always outlasts the lie. Always. You see, deception is built on weakness. It needs constant fuel. Constant whispers, constant gossip, constant drama to survive. But truth doesn't need to be defended. Truth stands on its own, and when the noise fades, when the dust settles, when the masks fall away, the truth is the only thing left standing. I know it's hard when you're in the middle of it. When people you trusted pull back, when rumors stain your name, when it feels like the ground under you is shaking. In those moments, it's easy to think the lie is winning, but that's because lies are loud. They demand attention, they move fast. Truth is quiet, it doesn't rush, it doesn't scramble, it doesn't need to fight for space. It simply waits steady until the weight of reality crushes the deception built against it. And it always does. The very words spoken against you will eventually reveal themselves for what they are. The very people who turned away will one day see clearly, because deception has no foundation. It collapses under its own weight. But if you've kept your integrity, if you've held on to your identity, if you've refused to bow to manipulation, then when the lie finally dies, you'll still be standing, stronger, wiser, untouchable. So don't fear the whispers, don't crumble under the weight of temporary shadows, don't confuse a season of opposition with the final outcome, because the truth always wins. And when it does, the same people who once doubted you, who once misjudged you, who once turned against you, will be forced to see the undeniable reality. You were never who the lie said you were. You were always more. You were always stronger, and no spirit, no manipulation, no witchcraft could ever erase that. And when you step back and look at it all, you realize this. The witchcraft spirit was never about the people, never about the rumors, never about the moments that broke your heart. It was always about your strength. It was always about silencing the light you carry, making you doubt your own worth, stripping you of your authority by turning you against yourself. But here's the victory. You see it now. You understand how it moves, how it whispers, how it manipulates, and once you can see it, you can defeat it. So stand firm, guard your spirit, protect your mind, refuse to fight the wrong battles, refuse to let lies shape your truth. Walk in your authority, because the truth inside you will always outlast the noise around you. The whispers may rise, the atmosphere may shift, people may come and go, but your strength, your integrity, your identity, they are unshakable. And in the end, no matter how dark the spirit tries to be, it cannot extinguish the light of someone who refuses to bow.